can people, if they know your phone number or email address, can they look you up and find you? And some are yes, some are no. So if you became friends with somebody on Snapchat and they're like, hey, let's change this communication over to text messaging, and now they know your phone number, they can use your phone number to look up to see whether you have a Cash App account, whether you have a Zelle account, and then they know how to demand payment from you. So they can reverse engineer what financial products you have.
My name's Nick Parford. I'm an AML SME for FeedSci, and I have the great pleasure of introducing Alison Jimenez to talk about sextortion and what that means today. Would you like to maybe explain a little bit about what sextortion is and how you came to be in this field?
Sure. No, thank you. And she said, I'm Alison Jimenez. I'm an economist, and I focus on financial crime and money laundering issues. About a year and a half ago, I started writing a white paper on how cryptocurrency was used in commercial CSAM, and CSAM standing for child sexual abuse material. Doing the research for that paper, I first became acutely aware of this really exponentially growing phenomenon called sextortion, which I'll break down what is sextortion. We just start with the basic word of extortion is when an offender coerces, forces, threatens someone into doing some action for the offender's benefit. And the sextortion part is when the threat involves sexually explicit material of the victim. So that offender, that bad guy, is threatening to release intimate images, nudes of the victim, either for maybe they want more content. That's been something that's been going on for a long time, especially with women and girls. They may be in a relationship that ends and a partner blackmails them with pictures to get back together or to embarrass them. But this new turn we've seen, and it really is a new scheme that bad actors are doing, is financially motivated sextortion. And that's when they threaten, the offender obtains intimate pictures, explicit pictures, and then threatens to release and share those images with others unless the victim pays them money. And the twist is that they are now exploiting children, and particularly teenage boys. And that was, in the course of my research, I said, well, there's this sudden surge in self-generated child pornography where the child took the pictures themselves. But where did it come from? Some was from the grooming of traditional sexual predators, and some was from this financial sextortion where children exchanged images with someone they thought was someone their own age, a cute girl in another city, and then that turned into pay me money, or else I'm going to share this with your schoolmates, your classmates, your teammates, your parents, your future employers.
So is this an organized crime group, or is this kind of like individuals just who are, I guess, being opportunistic?
The large surge is from organized crime groups. In particular, they're called the Yahoo Boys. They're operating out of Nigeria. Tracing the name back, Yahoo is how they used to send the Nigerian prince emails back in 90s and early 2000s. This is the same group of people that do all sorts of online scams, whether it's lottery or grandparent scam or romance scams. But they've added this new scam to their portfolio of financially extorting children. And when I say children, they really are targeting on teenage boys, ages 14 to 17, and boys in particular for the financial component. There's also some groups that are run out of Ivory Coast, and I'd say they are organized, maybe not at the industrial scale that you see in scam compounds in Southeast Asia, but these are groups of, 5, 10, 20 individuals working in concert to get as much money out of as many children as they can.
And how long do you think this has been going on? It sounds like a fairly recent thing, although interestingly, and it is timely, the FATF, the president mentioned this, that it is one of the fastest growing crimes that they're seeing, and they've issued some guidance on that and a report on it.
I'm very happy to see that they're coming out with that. Yeah. It's kind of been a lonely battle here for the past year on the financial side. There's certainly been journalists covering it and some folks focusing on the social media side. But I think I work in the financial compliance space, and even folks in the financial industry that I tell them about this crime, they're not aware of it. It hasn't happened to anyone they know yet that they're aware of. They haven't seen the one or two stories in the media. So the fact that FATF is putting out some information that spreads awareness and gives financial institutions something to look for, it's sad that it got to that point that we have to have this alert, but it's necessary. And circling back to it's a new crime. In the United States, our National Center for Missing and Exploited Children. They receive reports of suspected child exploitation online. And they receive those reports either from victims, from family members, but a lot of it comes from internet service providers and social media companies where they identify explicit imagery being shared on their rails, basically. Back in 2021, there was only over 100 complaints or reports about financially motivated sextortion, 100. And then 2023, there was 26,000. So that is the definition of exponential.
That's a hockey stick, yeah.
And those are just the reported. So this rule of thumb, every one report, there's 10 other children out there. And these are children who have shared an intimate image with a stranger who is a member of an organized crime group overseas who now has that content. I'm happy to talk about how many of the kids actually pay, how they pay, but I just want folks to understand the scale and also understand that now kids with their cell phones in their pockets, it's very easy for strangers to reach out to them via different platforms, Snapchat, Instagram, TikTok, their gaming console. Any way a stranger could get in contact with them is how they meet children, initiate the contact, and then eventually change it to some sort of, you're cute, let's exchange messages, and take it to a different level of exchanging intimate images.
I'm a parent of a 16-year-old boy, and I'm based out of the UK. So whilst it's what I found fascinating about having this interview with you is that although we're aware of it in the UK, I don't think it seems to be either as big a problem, or it's certainly I'm not seeing any reports into like our regulator, the NCA, and that
Sure.
who are our FIU. So I haven't seen any.
I don't think it's raised the awareness level yet.
Right.
Although it's definitely happening in the UK. Sadly, there's a running total of the number of suicides of victims. I think we're up to 40. I don't remember if it's 42 or 45. When I wrote my report, it was about 20, and that was 6 months ago. It is escalating and the consequences are deadly. But several of those are in the UK. So the interesting thing with NCMEC data, by looking at some of the social media communications, they can backtrack where did the offender, where were they located, or what language were they using, and where was IP address for the victim. So they definitely have folks that are communicating with children in Europe, in the UK, and there has been a few reported deaths of teenagers who committed suicide as a result.
I know in the UK we have a big problem with what we call country lines and how drugs are moving between cities and smaller towns and cities within the UK, and they're having teenagers running those sorts of drug lines. And yeah, you wonder to what extent that social media could also be used to facilitate that, particularly once you're a recipient or you're engaged in the process, maybe you then can't get out of it. I mean, what are you seeing in terms of responsibility from sort of like the social network providers? We see a lot of scams in the UK, and there's a lot of talk about marketplaces where they're not like financial institutions, so they don't appear to be as regulated heavily, therefore they don't seem to have the same sort of burdens on customer identification and scams, and we're doing quite a lot of work in that area. So I would imagine there's probably some sort of direction in terms of travel with these companies. Well,
there's certainly getting pressure from victims' families, from folks in the political spectrum of saying, social media, you need to do more. Meta caught a lot of attention last summer for having accounts of Nigerian scammers, and they did close down about 90,000. I don't know if that's an ongoing process. It should be. You close down one account, it's very easy to pop up with another. But in the U.S., our rules are a lot more lax in the social media space, and it's one component. I think what's interesting with so many scams, not just sextortion, whether it's romance scams or lottery scams, is the different components. You need the way to communicate with the victim, whether it's social media or text messages. You need to have a way for the bad guys to talk amongst each other, whether that's on Telegram or dark webs or encrypted communication. And then the why they're doing all this is to make money, and that's the financial mechanisms. And that's kind of where I start in my area's expertise is. I started really at the end of, well, how are they receiving money? How did that get to them? And they have to backtrack all the way, to the victim of how did they pay, the very beginning to the very end and all the middlemen in between. And that's something, as you kind of alluded to, there are middlemen. Every single case, because this is transnational, there needs to be that middleman who's consolidating the victim payments and getting it overseas. And depending on if it's a scam based out of Nigeria or Ivory Coast, that methodology looks a little bit different. But we do have several cases of indicted co-conspirators who are U.S. based who were pooling the funds of various victims. And since the victim payments are pretty low dollar in the grand scheme of things, $100, $300, $1,000, but that's everything to a teenager. That's everything they could scrape up. But for the bad guys to make it worthwhile to transfer that value overseas, they're going to be targeting, scattershot as many kids as they possibly can. And then they are organized in that they will accept any payment method, whether it's, peer-to-peer or gift cards or an old-fashioned wire, cash in the mail. And that's what's interesting and I think important for financial institutions, again, to know, saying, well, this is a cryptocurrency problem. Yes. This is a payments problem. Yes. This is a bank problem. Yes. It's a problem for, I would say, almost all types of financial institutions, perhaps maybe not bond dealers or something like that, but it touches on the bad guys will take any form of payment, and they have their conspirators who were professionally organizing the funds to get overseas. So
the old adage about then follow the money still holds true. And I guess it's a real challenge for the financial institutions and the payment service providers, because you say these are essentially low denomination payments. Are you seeing any sort of tangible action that FIs and payment service providers are trying to take to address this, or is it early days, would you say?
I think it's still early days. Some of the peer-to-peer payment providers, they were part of a White House summit where they got different social media payments in a room and saying, we need to tackle this problem. Whether those meetings have translated into change is questionable. And I'd love to hear from them. And I would love for those payment services to have more information for 14 accounts of, here are some red flags of, if you receive this request, this is what's suspicious, or here's some risks to be aware of.
Is anybody publishing that at the moment then, or because that would be very interesting to say, well, what in terms of the typologies and the money flows and those sorts of red flags, is there any?
Sure.
Yeah.
So that's what I've been working on.
Okay.
There is another company called Red Compass that has another white paper on some good information for financial institutions to start looking at. Right now, from the financial institution standpoint, they're a little bit behind where social media is. Social media is more aware of the problem. Financial institutions, it really hasn't reached their radar because A, they're not being sued over it yet, as social media companies are. They're not being called into congressional hearings as social media companies are over this particular topic. But these funds are going through the institutions. And I think where the challenge is, and I agree, the low dollar value does not trigger most rule-based systems. And that's, until financial institutions perhaps are aware of this, it's not raising any flags in their internal systems for these one-off smaller payments. Now, where it could be and should be is the mule accounts that are receiving payments. They might receive payments from Venmo, Cash App, Apple Pay, but those are usually then transferred back to a bank account. And then fintech companies should also be looking for suspicious activity. But then the bank where it's transferred back to, they should also be saying, well, do these transactions make sense? Why are they receiving all these low dollar amount transactions from a variety of peer-to-peer, and what type of business is this? And then why are they immediately, sending in those funds to a cryptocurrency exchange or taking that out in physical cash, which is how some of the Ivory Coast conspirators do it, because they take it out in cash and do old-fashioned hawala.
So hawala's in the mix as well then in terms of that transfer of value. Funnily enough, I mean, that's also been a recent FATF subject of interest around what more can be done with the hawala system, because it certainly seems to fly completely under the radar with traditional financial institutions and transaction monitoring. So that's quite a concerning thing to hear that form of exchange is in the mix.
Yeah. The Ivory Coast, they don't have a robust cryptocurrency market or scene. So they are, and also a lot of folks don't traditionally send a bunch of wires of high dollar values to Ivory Coast. There are cases, that is one method, but they have to send it in small, here's $2,000 through a traditional MSB. But to do that large value transfer, they were taking funds out in cash from a bank account that had funneled all these various payment methods into it. and then walked into hawala here in New York City, and that person transferred the funds. But they also are really adept at using gift cards. In fact, the second most demanded payment method for sextortion of children, financial sextortion, is gift cards. And I would say, just think about it. If you are a 13-year-old boy, 14-year-old boy, you don't have a job yet, you probably don't even have a bank account yet. Maybe you have Apple Pay because that's how your parents pay you allowance, maybe. And if you don't, you got a gift card from iTunes for Christmas, and they specifically request iTunes or Apple gift cards, which then will either be cashed out, sold on the black market for cash value, or they'll actually go ahead and buy Apple products and then ship them overseas. So it's kind of a slow, old-fashioned method to get funds to Ivory Coast. But in every case with Nigeria does have a very robust cryptocurrency marketplace. Every single time they transfer the funds overseas via crypto. So it's important from the investigative standpoint to understand that difference when you're trying to track down who's on the other end of that phone sending threatening messages to children. So they do. They threaten them. I'm going to share these with your school. I know all your friends. This is going to ruin your life. Your parents will never talk to you again. It's escalating threats with countdown clocks sometimes. You have 10 minutes to pay me, 9 minutes to pay me, really adding on the pressure to these kids who oftentimes succumb to the pressure and either pay and commit suicide, or just commit suicide because they don't know what to do. Who to talk to. So I'm happy to talk about what to do and who to talk to as well.
Yeah, I think that's really interesting. Because I think, as with a number of scams, one of the best ways we're seeing is through education. And a lot of the banks in the UK are spending, considerable effort in terms of constantly trying to reinforce with their customers about, is this the right transaction? Are you sure you know who it's going to? But as you say, as soon as you get put into a pressurized situation,
being blackmailed is a little bit different than being tricked into sending money for an investment. The interesting thing that I would look at specifically in the victim payments is, there are so many different payment methods. And these are teenagers, children, who cannot, in the U.S., unless until you're over 18 or 18 and over, you can't open a lot of financial accounts. So these are usually nested under a parent accounts. So I looked at what are the settings. If you are a 15-year-old boy, and I keep using boy because that's who they're targeting, and you have a peer-to-peer payment app, can people, if they know your phone number or email address, can they look you up and find you? And some are yes, some are no. So if you became friends with somebody on Snapchat and they're like, hey, let's change this communication over to text messaging, and now they know your phone number, they can use your phone number to look up to see whether you have a Cash App account, whether you have a Zelle account, and then they know how to demand payment from you. So they can reverse engineer what financial products you have, which is scary.
That is.
And that's something I really hope financial institutions listening will think about for children's accounts. Not every product does that. Not every financial product for teens allows the reverse lookup of, I know your email, I know your handle. I can determine if you have an account at this financial product. And if you don't, I'm going to try the next one. So the settings about privacy of, then also privacy of transactions. Social media and fintech are kind of blurring at this point, and some peer-to-peer payments, your transactions are public given certain settings. Others are not. So again, if you're a parent, the bad guys in some cases, they know it and say, if you're going to pay me this $200 for sextortion, say rugby equipment or something that doesn't come on. But in other cases, and again, this is something financial institutions should be looking at, when the victims made the payments, there's the public comments and there's also private ones. And the comments were literally, blackmail payment, delete my nudes, please, I don't want to die. These are the message that teenagers, boys were including in a payment on a peer-to-peer app, that the app has that information. Where it gets tricky is when the funds move from the peer-to-peer app back to a bank, that information isn't routinely shared. So the bank might just see, we have a net amount of $3,000 coming from a Cash App account for XYZ person. And that's just an example. And all those underlying details of, actually it was 15 different transactions from 17 different boys across 14 different states. that information isn't necessarily something that the bank would receive. And this is, again, some of these problems are not just extortion problems. That's, if you're having scams on, Facebook Marketplace, these are also methods where the information doesn't always get communicated across the payment rails between financial institutions. But this is especially problematic in this particular scheme that's targeting kids.
It is terrifying. I'm not aware of half of these things. I think that the plethora of new payment apps, that just keep increasing all the time, does make it exceptionally difficult.
And it's there's no standard, which is interesting to me. From if you're having a baby bassinet, there's standards in the U.S. If you're going to have a car seat, there's standards. Granted, these are teenagers, but they're still minors. But right now, there's no government standard of should a teenager's financial account be searchable by anyone. Can a teenager be able to send funds to anyone or adults? There are some ways if you wanted to change or have a baseline standard for everyone. And if a lot of folks in the United States don't want more regulation, but if you are a financial institution, you can change the default settings. Instead of, say, Apple Pay, they do have different levels of who can my child send money to: friends and family only, acquaintances, or everybody. But the default is everybody. Perhaps instead we should change it to friends and family only. There's things that can be done like that where the default settings are more private. Instead of having transactions being public, then the default setting is private and it needs a parental approval. But I don't want to put all the responsibility on parents, and certainly not kids. These are things financial institutions should be thinking about before they roll out products to children. And,
yes.
Certainly have seen problems and maybe reevaluate, say, gosh, we did not think, we're not as evil as the bad guys. We didn't think our product would be exploited this way. Well, now you know.
Yep.
And now let's think about, if this is a minor account, maybe they can only send out a payment, but not let a stranger look them up and say, oh, I know you have XYZ payment platform, pay me money.
So yes, that's a really good point, because in a previous life, I looked after the global risk methodology for customer risk for a tier 1 financial institution. But when we were setting risk tolerance, and product was obviously a part of that, so you'd want to know intimately how the products are being used. But certainly that was done through a specific lens, and we are going back to 12, 15 years. Now I think, and what's so important about these sorts of podcasts and banks that are out there listening at the moment, is to think of these typologies, and particularly emerging ones like sexploitation, as we're talking about. How does that impact, as you're right, the product that we're servicing? What are the risks within that product to facilitate those sorts of crimes? And then things, better use of things like machine learning and AI to detect these outliers, and particularly the
Sure.
combination of monies.
And one other thing that's common is if a child pays, then they get more demands for more payments. So there's certainly instances where a child never interacted with another account, and now they're paying $300 a week every Friday at 2 p.m. because they're on a payment plan now from the bad actor. So I think some of the
payment plan, that's very worrying.
Where they,
Wow.
we received your first payment, but we're not going to permanently delete the pictures until, unless you keep paying us. And as soon as you stop paying us, we'll release them, which is sadly how some of the families of suicide victims found out their child had been victimized by this. The child committed suicide, and they received explicit images of their son, after his death. And that's when they realized what had, caused him to take his life was this extreme distress that these people are putting on their child. It's when they receive the pictures. Sometimes, about 20% of the time, the pictures are shared, and that is the minority of times, but it does happen. I think a good space for financial institutions is to look at those mule accounts. I know that's certainly something in so many different financial crime. The mules are essential, and it might be hard to pick up on the $200 one-time payment by a victim, but the mule accounts who are receiving funds from several different peer-to-peer apps that are eventually going into a bank account, or going into a bank account and then back out to a crypto firm, or going into a crypto firm. The mule accounts might have a better fingerprint that financial institutions have some experience working on. And I do feel that probably there are financial institutions who are filing suspicious activity reports that they don't quite know what the underlying scheme is, but they know, like, this looks like a mule activity, or this looks like some sort of fraud, but they don't have that, payment memo that said, blackmail. But they do see that there's a bunch of different people that they've never interacted with receiving funds into an account that's open for a short amount of time. Another interesting thing is one person opening many accounts at many different financial institutions at once. So the communication between financial institutions, they do have that ability in the United States to say, we're seeing this side, what does it look like on your side, to increase the communication of understanding what's going on in these accounts. But the money mule and the perpetrators are actually involved in multiple scams. So you might be looking at something like, this looks like a romance scam, or this looks like a business email compromise, professional money mule who's moving the funds. And within that same bank account or within that same crypto account, there's also going to be smaller dollar values that are from sextortion. And since it's sextortion of children, that in the United States is included in our definition of child pornography. So there's a whole other level, and other charges can be brought against the offenders who are demanding payment from the kids because they cause the production of explicit imagery of children. United States, but a lot of places, the financial crime is, the seriousness is measured on, how much dollars were lost or how much dollars are at issue. And this crime, because the victims are children, they don't have as much money as a senior citizen who's, had been saving their entire life. The dollar value is not there. But I don't want the urgency of this crime to be missed because the dollar value isn't as high as, one business email compromise could swipe $2 million from an account, whereas this scam, $2 million means that there's probably 6,000 kids who were blackmailed because they're each paying $300 a piece. And that's just the ones who paid. So then that means 18,000 kids now have explicit imagery in the hands of a Nigerian criminal organization, which they might hold on to for later. Who knows what they're going to do with it 3 or 4 years from now, once the kid graduates college or is in the military or works at a bank. So these are, when I really start going down the rabbit hole, that's where I start going. To bring me back, I think about how can we apply the skills and the technologies we are using in the financial industry that's catching some other types of crimes that can certainly be repurposed for this crime, even if the dollar levels aren't there.
Yeah, that's interesting. That almost like still the mechanisms for how do you acquire and launder your dirty proceeds are still similar, regardless, kind of like scam type, as you said, like romance scams, other types of scams. That the way the transactions are looking could be interpreted in many different ways. But ultimately, I would imagine the investigator saying, "Hey, this looks like a mule account. I may not understand what is being laundered and for what reason."
Is it a low dollar drug transaction, or is it sextortion? And those might look the same if you're, a retail seller of drugs. That might actually look the same, honestly.
Yeah.
But the fact that it is, many transactions with no purpose, or, one person using multiple identifications to open an account, those type of things, hopefully at least it will get into the, a SAR filing, and then law enforcement can take it from there saying, oh, we had a report through our IC3 or through NCMEC of this victim or this bank account came up in something else. And now we can trace that back to, your SAR. So hopefully, even if you don't know exactly what it is, it gets into the system by one of the kind of catch-all categories of this doesn't make sense, SAR, and can be useful to law enforcement.
Yeah, and it just strikes me as well. There could be an opportunity for any banks out there that are listening at the moment in terms of, how could they gain competitive advantage? Well, by showing that they have child accounts that are actually, with products built in mind to, minimize and mitigate these risks around, being, the various victim crimes, particularly sexploitation, for example.
Sure. Yeah, and since a lot of the accounts, you do need to have an adult sponsor. If I'm an adult and I'm choosing, well, do I want my child to, receive their allowance via platform A or platform B or platform C? And I'm able to compare them saying, well, this one allows any stranger in the world to connect with them, or this one has transactions that are private. There's even things like, if you're a parent, do you get an alert every time there's a transaction in the account? Or do you get a monthly statement? Or you get a monthly statement, but you have to log in and purposely go and look. And parents are going to have different desires of knowledge, and maybe getting an alert every day when your kid's buying, a snack with their Apple Pay after school, maybe that starts to drown out things. So that I think there's perhaps some research that needs to be done, because it is really new that kids have, electronic payments in their pocket. This is a new thing. I mean, when I say that, that's true. Cash App did not roll out teen accounts until November 2021. Venmo didn't roll out teen accounts till 2023. So this is new. Certainly kids were using their parents' accounts before then, but accounts that are specifically for teens, those are new. And I don't think it's a coincidence that also when we saw the spike of sextortion, because bad guys now have a way to reach directly into kids' pockets without the parent being involved. Maybe they are the in fact default owner, but the communication's going back and forth between the offender and the child, and the payments are going back and forth. In most cases, they don't need any sort of parental permission to, if they have funds in their peer-to-peer account or in their bank account that has Zelle. In most cases, they don't need to ask their parents for permission to send the funds elsewhere. Yeah. They just can.
Wow. And you talked about crypto as well, and the use, I mean, because obviously crypto has been cited as being, particularly crypto exchanges, as a prime way of laundering money. And as you said, you were seeing a lot of that activity, that funds are being transferred onto a crypto exchange and then sent anywhere around the world.
Yep. So that's really how I came into the world of financial sextortion of children. I started at the very end of, I just had my research was doing keywords, cryptocurrency and CSAM or cryptocurrency. And then using those keywords, basically it came to these indictments of cryptocurrency was used in child pornography, but that particular type of child pornography was self-generated images. And I'm just going to backtrack a little bit. I'm a teenage boy. I'm on Snapchat. Some cute girl wants to add me as a friend. I'm like, oh, she's cute. And we have like 5 friends in common. So you do. And you chat back and forth. And then the night gets a little bit later and she's like, oh, you want to exchange images, but they're going to, use a little bit different language than that. Yeah. And it's the same thing as with romance scams where they have scripts that are for sale. You can see the scripts sadly on TikTok and YouTube. There's entire channels just devoted to, it's called blackmail or BM. So if you want to see what the scripts are, Google BM scripts. There's pages and pages of folks out there selling it. So just like romance scams where they have scripts they follow. But it's a much quicker scheme. Usually they switch to some sort of maybe encrypted message and saying, well, I'll send you a picture, you send me, and the pictures are exchanged. And the kids often assume, well, it's Snapchat, it's disappearing. Not if the other person has 2 phones. Those are, just want to make sure kids are aware of that. It might disappear on your phone, but on the other side, they've recorded that. And as soon as that happens, as soon as a bad guy has your explicit image, they immediately go into blackmail mode. It's not this long, drawn-out process like pig butchering is, where they're establishing this relationship. This is a much quicker, fast cash, as many targets as possible scenario. So as soon as they get it, the pressure starts. A lot of the, sadly, I read through the indictments and the stories in the news with suicides. The kids are paying and committing suicide within minutes or hours, maybe as long as a couple of days. But most don't commit suicide. But I think, sadly, that's how it raises to the consciousness of folks, because otherwise these kids are just suffering in silence until something like that happens.
The level of stress they must be going through.
Horrible.
Who do you turn to?
Yeah. And that one thing back to social media is a lot of the contact initially is through Instagram, where a year ago, if a child added a new friend, they would automatically see all of your contacts. And that's how they would threaten, because now I know I'm friends with you and I see your 400 friends. In response, Instagram for new accounts had changed that setting to private. But again, if you're a parent or teenagers listening, you might want to by default set that, because that is how they put pressure on you. If they don't know who your friends are, it really downplays their threat. But when they say, here's a collage of all your friends from your high school or your baseball team, and here's your nude image, this is what I'm going to send to them, that is literally what they're doing. And it's chilling and it's effective. But there's no reason to think it's going to stop until all the different social media, financial institutions, law enforcement, education becomes aware of the problem and some solutions to prevent it, slow it down, reduce its effectiveness.
Well, yeah. Well, Alison, it's given us a lot to think about, but I'm truly grateful that you were here to raise awareness about this. I genuinely feel my age now, thinking I had no idea about some of the complexities and how opportunistic criminals can be in this heinous crime. Is there anything you'd like to leave us with that we haven't put?
Sure. And this is probably the most important thing. Okay. So if you're a parent or a teenagers listening, if this happens to you, if you experience this is not the end of your life. There are people out there who will help you. You can go to National Center for Missing and Exploited Children, and they have Take It Down, which is a website that will prevent your picture from being shared. So when I talked about the internet service providers, they look for, in a secure way, child pornography. They will prevent your image from being shared more. So go to either takeitdown.org or National Center for Missing and Exploited Children. And if you're a parent, a lot of parents have that first talk with their child saying, don't share, explicit images. And the conversation ends there. You need to have a second conversation with your child that if you do, when you do, because 1 out of 7 children age 4th grade to 12th grade has shared an explicit image with someone they met online. 1 out of 7. So if you're in a high school class, 4 people in that class have, or even if you're in a 4th grade class. Anyways, you need to have the second conversation of if this happens to you or when it happens to you, there's nothing that I will ever be embarrassed of for you. I'm here to help you. I will help you get through it. Because I just want to remove suicide as an option. And you need to have that second conversation.
Yeah, and I think that, well, thank you so much for that, because certainly that first part of the conversation, I have had, but not the second part, and I wasn't aware of that.
Yeah, and so if you're not comfortable coming to me, here's the UK equivalent, which I don't know off the top of my head, but I know you do have a UK equivalent to the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children.
Yeah.
But there are resources out there. And I would also suggest Thorn has done some good research based on the information from NCMEC. So if you want to start from the beginning of like, okay, I heard about this. This is horrible. How do I talk to my children about it? They even have here's how you start the conversation with your child, because it's such an awkward topic. But it gives parents some pointers to have this conversation with their child and how to prevent, the extreme worst outcomes. Hopefully, if children stop responding to these demands or stop responding to friend requests from people that they don't know, again, there'll be less bad actors trying to profit from this crime.
Well, Alison, thank you very much. I mean, yes, I will definitely be having a chat with my teenager about this, but also I'll be raising awareness with our banking clients as well, and try to understand what they're doing and to what level are they even aware of some of these.
It's a new and growing crime. So that's where I am now, understanding the crime and raising awareness. And I don't have all the solutions, and every financial product institution has some exposure to this. So I think the solutions are going to be different depending on what products you offer, who you offer them to. But we need to start somewhere. And thank you for giving me this opportunity to talk about it and bring it to the forefront of people that are fighting financial crime.
Our pleasure. Thank you so much for your time as well.
Thank you.